Hey everybody, welcome to this bonus edition of the Graduation Equity webinar series. We've heard a lot about folks needing support around scheduling and how to support so many students who've been struggling through the pandemic. And we want to support you and hope that the expertise from Always Be Learning will be helpful. ABL is an education software and services company that's passionate about providing each student with the access and opportunity to maximize their potential. They believe each student deserves multiple viable, meaningful post-secondary options. ABL takes the student's first approach to operations, understanding pathways, access to courses, student equity, and teacher workload balance through the lens of the schedule. They work with district leaders to not only elevate pathways to success, but use the results to take action through the school schedule and create systemic change. And they're just so smart. So we've brought them to you. We're absolutely pumped to learn from them today, and we can't wait to get started. So I'm just going to hand it off to Natalie to kick things off.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having us here. We're incredibly excited. As Kefi said, I'm starting off everything. And so today, specifically, what we're going to be talking about is turning that academic acceleration policy into action. We talk a lot about mindset. We talk a lot about policies and processes and procedures, but really and truly, what does it look like when we put it into place within our different organizations? Today, in regards to our agenda, first, we're going to go through some introductions and agenda overview. But also know overarchingly, the things we're going to look at today is we're going to look at specifically at the policy briefly, give some context, talk about the importance of access to advanced work. How do we expand the pipeline? How do we allow for more access for those who don't normally have access to these processes? And wrap up and a call to action. Know specifically, as we go through this process, we welcome your questions. We're here for you and to make sure that you can take some little nugget back and use it in order to grow your organizations and to make sure that they're better than when they started. So please, please, please use the Q&A feature to ask any and all questions, and we'll pause as necessary to make sure that we're clarifying whatever your needs may be. With us today, of course, I am Dr. Natalie Nichols. We have Dr. Stephen Gehring and Mr. Jack Shaw. And we're very excited to be able to speak to you today on this process. As was discussed, our specific vision is to make sure that every student gets to maximize their potential. They get to choose the choice. We don't choose for them, but they get to make an informed decision as far as what's going to be absolutely best for their future. And how do we do this? Specifically, what we're going to be talking about is the idea that we have very specific structures in place within our organizations. How do we master these different processes in order to achieve that thing that we all want? For our students to be successful, for them to go out into the world and to be able to live incredibly fulfilling lives. So let's go ahead and get started today as we start with the very first part within our agenda. And I'm handing off, I believe, to Dr. Stephen Gehring.
Actually, I think it's me. You want me to? Yeah, I'm just going to pick it up.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm handing off to Mr. Jack.
I'm still just trying to recover. My parents are probably still sitting there realizing that, oh, if he had just written his dissertation, he could have been Dr. Jack Shaw on this call too, but forever I sit at ABD. So a little bit of backstory and context. So we've been working with a number of districts in the state. I think we're up to the numbers you can see on the screen. We've got 19 districts, over 50 schools, a bunch of educators, a lot of transcripts that we've analyzed and courses we've reviewed, and along the eastern and western half of the state, but it's all around trying to support the academic acceleration policy that is fully implemented as of this year. So I know this is review for most of you, but Washington has put a big stake in the ground on the importance of getting students access to and enrolled in these higher rigor, more intense courses. So making sure that they're not only getting access to them, but there are not gaps between the students who do and don't have access to them. And that's what we're trying to help promote through our work. And we'll move right into kind of what does the world look like. So the importance of access, a couple of slides on these next few. 80% of the jobs lost during the Great Recession required high school diploma or less. Yet 70% of all the newly created jobs in Washington will require some post-secondary education. So really what we're talking about is what does demand look like today and what does supply look like? And this is kind of very, very recent stuff. So this speaks to the impact of COVID. And again, we're talking about supply and demand. So the yellow box is there. What does demand look like? So employers are adding almost 400,000 net new jobs over 5 years. And the state's annual job growth is 2% a year. And we're estimating 70% of jobs will require or be filled by workers with a post-high school credential. So demand is up. And what does supply look like? So the arrows on the bottom kind of starting to highlight this gap. So enrollments have dropped. And now how are we going to make that up? So community and technical college enrollments down 23%. Four-year enrollment, public institutions, 7.5% enrollment. First-year students at four-year institutions down 12%, and Pell eligible students at four-year institutions down 15%. So really, the punchline here is how are we doing in getting kids prepared to enter the job force and fill the jobs that are going to be created over the next couple of years? And what does that look like in the state? If we're looking at the country here, Washington's in the bottom quartile. So trails the majority of the nation in percentage of kids enrolled in post-secondary education, young adults, 18 to 24-year-olds. So, eighth from the bottom. And then the next slide, again, in the bottom quartile of percentage of low-income students enrolled in post-secondary. So it's kind of the quick and dirty of the context, and we wanted to save most of our time for saying, I'm assuming you're familiar with the challenge and the opportunity presented, and now we'll talk much more in depth about what we might do about it. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Gehring.
So there's lots of things schools and school leaders, district leaders can do to address the topic that Jack just talked about. So we know Washington State is outpacing the nation in terms of new jobs, and we know disproportionately the number of jobs. It doesn't all require, so we're going to use the word post-secondary readiness and college readiness interchangeably. We're not talking all students necessarily needing a four-year degree. We're talking certificates, trade school, technical school, 2-year, 4-year, but the vast majority of jobs that Jack outlined require some sort of post-secondary. And what's one thing, what's one thing that we can do in terms of really making big gains? And one of the things in Washington State with that academic acceleration policy identified that is really focusing on course taking. So one of the biggest levers that we have available to us is thinking about the courses that we provide students and what access do we give them. Some great research has been done over the last couple of decades. And one of the biggest predictors for student post-secondary readiness really lies in the course taking that students get. This quote here, African-American and Latino students, for example, the biggest predictor out of all of the pre-college indicators is the academic intensity and the quality of their high school coursework. So how do we leverage our master schedule? What do we use? Our master schedule, because we're a people organization, because we all work in education, about 80 to 90% of our budgets is focused on people. So this is one of the biggest areas we can focus on in terms of what courses are kids in, how are we enrolling them, what courses do we have staff teach. Lots of us actually are involved with a multi-million-dollar budget when you think about the courses and classes that people teach. And we just really wanted to, out of all the things we can focus on, what we are going to talk about today in the time that we have with you is how do you leverage your master schedule? And just wanted to provide you a couple quotes, just letting you know that out of all the things to do, what we'll be talking about today, there's lots of things you could do to increase college and career readiness, but we are really going to focus on how do you get access to those rigorous courses. So Washington State put their big stake in the ground and said, providing more students access to advanced courses getting students more college credit while they're in high school, and improving our post-secondary enrollment is one big state goal that has been articulated. So what can we do in terms of making sure that all of our kids have access to those courses? So we are going to talk about how can you actually leverage your master schedule, and we are going to give you some strategies on what you can do around that. And we have created, sometimes we refer to it with this acronym here, this narrow, add, remove barriers, and build pipelines. These are 4 strategies that we have seen around the country. And we are going to talk through each of these on how you can actually use these strategies to improve academic acceleration. So we know budgets are tight. We know folks are having difficulty on implementing the academic acceleration policy, trying to get more kids into rigorous coursework. And we are going to talk about each of these and how you can use these strategies. So we're going to take you through one by one, show you some examples of what the data looks like, and give you 3 to 4 strategies and things to think about with each of these that you can use in order to improve your schedule and improve access to post-secondary readiness. So we'll jump into the very first one, narrow. And this one is often one that folks don't think about. And it's really around thinking, do you have non-rigorous course offerings that have been added to your schedule that need to be removed, that aren't preparing students for post-secondary? Our company works with school districts all over the United States. And one thing we see is a range of courses. This is a sample of different courses that we've seen from the United States. And really what we're seeing here is have a desired pathway that you're trying to get your students to. So for example, this might not be your pathway, but this is one sample pathway. So think about what you're trying to accomplish and reduce your schedule as much as possible to have kids head towards that pipeline. So for example, let's say you're trying to get kids towards pre-calculus or stats. So kids are coming in, scholars are coming into your school district, enrolled in algebra, and you're trying to get as many scholars towards pre-calculus or statistics aligned to their high school and beyond plan. That's your focus. Oftentimes, one of the things you need to think about is, do you have other courses that students are enrolling in that are distracting or pulling kids away from your goals? So for example, in this graphic, sometimes school districts offer these other courses to support students, but what you find is large numbers of students sometimes kind of enroll in these courses and don't end up getting towards the desired coursework. We see this over and over and over across the United States, where oftentimes schools and districts are offering too many courses, and very, very few students end up, when we actually ask them, what is your desired pathway that you're trying to get students to? Many school districts are realizing that they've offered too many choices and options along that, and students are enrolling that. Here's a sample school district. When we looked at their data with them, when they actually saw the flow of their students through the curriculum, and they actually saw what were seniors taking, they were shocked when they saw the numbers of kids, for example, that were in pre-calculus or in statistics or in calculus. They had kids all over the place when they realized that they had created a whole bunch of other courses, and students weren't progressing along a regular pipeline, and the offerings and choices that they were offering was causing a whole lot of inequity inside their master schedule, and students weren't progressing to their desired sequences. So a couple things on narrowing, things to think about. First of all, as much as possible, have the difficult conversations and remove tracked courses and options that don't align to post-secondary expectations. Come together with your team, sit down with your math team, sit down with your department, or it depends on what subject area you're looking at. Do you need to have those course offerings, and pare down and eliminate the ones or reduce the number of sections as much as possible if it's not aligned to post-secondary expectations? One piece of advice I give folks is, would you put your own child in that course? Is that a course that you would put your own child in as part of their high school and beyond plan, aligned to their goals? Ask that question and make those decisions. Second, if you say, geez, we've heard Abel's presentation and they're telling us to kind of reduce our course offerings, but we're not going to do that, then our advice is typically across the country, we see lots of inequity in terms of how students choose between all the choices and options. So there's been lots of studies that show more choices and options can actually exacerbate inequity. So if you have lots of choices and options, then our guidance or advice to you is couple that with more guidance and support. And we're not talking about only counselors. It's impossible to have 1 or 5 counselors provide this kind of guidance or navigation to folks. So step 1, remove these courses. Step 2, if you're not going to remove these courses and you're going to have a whole bunch of choices and a really, really large catalog, then couple it with lots of support to assist families and students on how do you choose between all these different courses, and why would I choose this course over this particular course, and really assist families in making that, and monitor your data to make sure that you don't have particular courses where certain students, like maybe all of your students on free and reduced lunch are choosing this pathway, or certain students from historically underserved student groups are choosing pathways that are different from other student groups. So really, really make sure you're providing enough guidance and assistance on that second one. The last thing are some benefits that oftentimes schools and districts don't think about. We know your budgets are really tight. One of the big benefits about narrowing course offerings that is really, really powerful is it can improve your efficiency. So in tight budget times, the more choices and options you have, anytime that you don't fill that particular course up. So maybe your collective bargaining agreement runs it at 30, but it's one section at 25 and another section at 27, another section at 23. You start doing that over and over and over on a whole bunch of different options, and you really can end up with an inefficient master schedule. Sometimes schools and districts that pare down their master schedule, offer fewer choices and options, actually can improve efficiency because there's fewer options. You can fill those courses up and sometimes actually leverage significant dollars and staffing and FTE to support students in these courses. So you say, geez, I don't know if our students can succeed in the pre-calc or succeed in the statistics, using the example that we just provided. Oftentimes by reducing your offerings, you can improve your efficiency and leverage some additional resources and dollars that you can support students with. And then the last thing is it really can be a tool to help you support teachers. When you have teachers teaching by themselves, teaching a course, maybe you have one teacher teaching business math, or another teacher teaching financial math, another teacher teaching pre-calc. When they're teaching all these different courses by themselves, it's oftentimes there's nobody to collaborate with or they can talk to. So by reducing your schedule, you can often have multiple teachers teaching a topic. They can collaborate together. You can create some PLC work. You can provide some focused PD. You can use anchor papers and really provide space for teachers to really learn from each other and share with each other and collaborate in ways that a large master schedule doesn't support. So those are 4 things around narrowing that we really suggest. We suggest having some regular reviews, paring these courses down, and coupling it with some strong guidance and advisement. And I think we have a question, Kefi. Is there something
Yeah,
there?
we do. It sounds like there's a district and they're having issues with attendance engagement, and they use extra courses like financial math to encourage that engagement and motivation. How can they meet that engagement need while still narrowing their offerings?
Yeah, that's a great
Okay.
question. That's a great question in terms of making the choices. The first question, I guess I would say is, well, there are a couple of things. One is separating out really, really good courses, and the question around, is it preparing students for post-secondary options? So Jack outlined where the jobs are, and students will need to go to some sort of certificate or trade school or technical school. So sometimes it's separating out and saying, is that course aligned to post-secondary? And is that just a great course? Financial math could be a great example. There's some great things around investment and banking and just really, really good courses that might be a great class to teach. And you have to say, is that preparing students for post-secondary math? Or is it maybe just another awesome course that we want to offer that supplements there? So you have to ask that question. Is it preparing students for post-secondary? Is it aligned to post-secondary expectations? And if it's really good content and it's not aligned to post-secondary, it's really good content that we think kids should learn, great. That might be you can embed it inside a course or teach it as a separate course. It might just be a great class that you want to offer students and tools to offer kids in order to be successful adults in the world that might supplement their math. So I think that's one tough question to add. And then sometimes there's just some conversations with kids about and families about why sometimes in mathematics or in other subjects that you might not see the actual practical application, and it's helping students inside our courses, so better connections inside our courses to actual jobs and actual applications. So there's some curriculum changes we can do. Anything else, Natalie, that's jumping out to you that answers that question?
I will say this one thing. We presuppose, and I've made this mistake, is that by adding classes that are quote unquote easier, that it means that the students will come to the classes and it will be better for them. And actually, I've found the opposite. Once we tighten up, I went through this exact same process, and once we actually tightened up the course progression, and then we also were a little bit more stringent as far as what our expectations were for the students, we actually, ironically, enjoyed higher attendance rates, a higher passing rates, even in those classes that were quote unquote tougher. The issue more so was, hate to say it, but sometimes the teachers that were serving our students, there wasn't a reason for the students wanting to be in that area. So all the time, it's not necessarily the students lacking motivation. Sometimes there are other things happening within our system, and we have to decide to address it. And so what we found, especially within our math department, was it wasn't the attitude necessarily that we wanted for our children as far as how they would feel within that space. Because when we looked at all of our different subject areas, we were actually enjoying higher rates of attendance in other subject areas versus other subjects such as math. We were able to do an entire overhaul in our science department, and where you thought you would see identical rates of attendance, science was incredibly higher than math. And so we realized it was more so a change in attitude and mindset and how our teachers were sometimes making our kids feel. And we really had to do that work. It wasn't easy, but we realized the problem wasn't necessarily the kids not being motivated, but they just didn't feel motivated in that space.
And I want to make sure I clarify to, I think, another question. We're not saying don't have any choices and options at the upper level courses in those subject areas. You might say, this is an incredible course. It's aligned to post-secondary. Some examples in chat, you might have a math in the trades, or you might have a business math where students are getting post-secondary credit and it's aligned to a local university or expectations. We're not saying don't have any of those. We're just saying be really, really thoughtful about choices you do offer in your schedule. Do you need to have those? Are certain students getting disproportionately enrolled in those courses? And are those courses launching pads for students to post-secondary success? And again, it could be in trade school, technical school, 2-year, 4-year, and really tracking those students going forward and making sure that if you're offering that, is it a launch pad, or is it limiting students' choices and options after? That's what we're really prompting there. So great questions. So that's narrowing. And we are going to move to the next one, which is adding. Exact opposite of what we just said. We do still work with schools and districts around the country. In Washington State, this is less of an issue in Washington State. Most school districts have advanced courses, but there's still some where there's opportunities for us to really leverage additional post-secondary credits for students inside our subject areas. So again, often registration is particularly focused on high school graduation. Our nation and our state has had such a great push. We've done so much work on dramatically improving our graduation rates, and there's so much to celebrate with what educators have done to making sure that students are getting to the finish line. This is an example of a school district with their data. When they looked at it, they realized, oh, wow, we were really, really focused. They built into their registration process, students doing a transcript evaluation and students checking off, check, 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 I'm done with mathematics. And they realized they had large numbers of students not going on, in this case, to a 4th-year math. And they realized, wow, we don't have options at that senior year for students, or we don't have lots of students moving on and the right courses in place. So look at your data, understand, do you need to have high quality dual enrollment? There's some great courses, college in the high school, could be AP, IB, Cambridge. There's some great programs out there. Project Lead the Way, lots of great curriculum partners out there where you can add some really high quality courses aligned to post-secondary. Students can be garnering credit while they're post-secondary credit while they're in high school, and it can also have some big benefits for your school district. Lots of students enroll in Running Start, which is a great option for students, but there's a lot more we can do as a state in getting students access to post-secondary credit and enrolling right in our own schools with our own staff and our own teachers. We have some incredible teachers that are very, very caring for students, and having students enrolled in these courses while they're with some really caring, thoughtful teachers inside our K-12 system can be a great spot for them to earn their first college credit and have the wraparound support services. So really think about, do you have the right courses? And we recommend that every school district analyze how students are progressing through the curriculum. So we do data and analytics for schools and districts, but you can do this very, very easily by looking at student course progressions, looking at how they're progressing through, analyzing, do we even offer courses? Sometimes we go into, this is actually really common in Washington State, where lots of schools don't even offer the opportunity for students to get to advanced world languages or college bearing credit in world language courses. When they look at it and they do their analysis, they don't even have enough students enrolling, or sometimes it's so few students enrolling that maybe those fourth year students are coupled with third year students in one class, and we're asking world language teachers to teach multiple years of language in one classroom in really, really difficult circumstances. So really looking at your progressions and saying, do we need to add more courses and more options for students? So adding in summary, conduct an audit. We recommend everybody look at your course offerings, and at least in your math, science, English, social studies, world language, CTE, try to have as many post-secondary credit-bearing pathways as possible where students can garner post-secondary credit while in high school. Do you have those opportunities? Do you have opportunities for students to gather meaningful post-secondary credits that they can transfer to a variety of post-secondary options? Leverage proven curriculum partners is the second one we want to talk about. We know there's hundreds of really small districts in the state. Sometimes you don't have the capacity of a large teaching and learning department to design new courses and build new courses. There are some incredible courses out there that have been created in partnership with local universities, some college and the high school programs. We have some outstanding courses there, Project Lead the Way, AP, IB, Cambridge, where folks have put hundreds and hundreds of hours into designing courses. Leverage those outstanding organizations, those outstanding courses. Designing courses is incredibly difficult. So as much as possible, use those proven curriculum partners. And then the last thing is focus on teacher training and professional development as much as possible. So a couple things here. If you use these proven curriculum partners, they often have some incredible teacher training tools where you can send teachers to an AP Summer Institute, or partnering with your local college in some regional consortium, and providing high quality PD to assist high school teachers in understanding what are the expectations for that college in the high school or that AP course. So some great opportunities. Another thing you can do if you're a larger district or in a regional consortium is you can use an outstanding teacher to mentor other teachers. So sometimes there's some training you could do, for example, or you might have an outstanding teacher that has been teaching AP biology or college in the high school, African-American history course, and you've been partnering and they've been really, really successful, outstanding teacher. You can partner that teacher with other local teachers and create an internal mentoring program or a regional mentoring program to really support other teachers in the implementation of that course and sharing best practices. So lots of opportunities there, really encouraging schools and districts to try to have at least one post-secondary credit-bearing course in all of the core subject areas in CTE if you can. And I will hand it off to Natalie. I don't see any questions on removing barriers.
Okay. In thinking about removing barriers, first I want to kind of set the context. Oftentimes, and I think previously, I had always early on in my career thought of my work as I needed to sort who needs to be in which environment so that people can have the right environment for them, whether it be SPED, ELL, on-level courses, advanced courses. Later on, though, I realized that I was doing a disservice to the students. My job shouldn't be to sort and simply to think about graduation, but am I helping you create an academic resume to where you can move on and where you can be successful? And so we really started thinking differently about this idea of sorting students, and more so thinking about, based on the information that Jack shared with us, the fact that based on the society that our students are graduating into, they need a higher level of skills. So just like all of these different industrial revolutions, just like all these different things that we've gone through in history, requiring different things from our citizenry, it's the same thing now with our students. So as district leaders, campus leaders, we have to then change our mindset as far as what our specific job and our purpose is, and not necessarily to sort, but really and truly to have students have access to a certain level of curriculum so that they can access the world of work and what that world of work is going to be asking of them. And so I say this not to say that everything is about college readiness. What I'm going to say, it's about future readiness. Not everyone goes straight into college, or not everyone needs college, but they will need some kind of post-secondary life in order to be successful. And what we're finding, if we move on to the next thing, oftentimes what we see is once students are in a certain type of course, there are no off ramps in there. If they're in an on level or a general course, there are no off ramps in order for them to be able to access accelerated courses, advanced courses. And while we don't need them to be in all accelerated courses, we do understand that that curriculum allows them access to skills where they can have skills in order to be considered future ready, so they can access that world of advanced work that is, that all our industry is now asking of our students. And so what we're looking at is making sure then we are not cutting students off from getting to these different courses. Things that we've seen that people have done is, hey, you have to complete a specific course beforehand. You have to have a certain GPA. You have to have a gifted and talented designation. You have to have a recommendation from a certain teacher, get them to sign off on it. I think part of what I've seen in my district, we've had where certain things where if you don't have at least a 90% in the course, if you don't have a teacher recommendation, if you haven't passed a state assessment at a certain level, if you haven't done all of those things, sometimes that bars you access to something else. And so what we're saying is within our organizations, what we'd like to see is more so, we know what they need to be successful, and then figuring out, if I know you need to be in a certain level of course, what then interventions can I put in place in order to help you access that? And how do I pull you into those courses rather than to wait for students to decide specifically on their own? So what we would really like to look at as far as removing those barriers is figuring out, as Stephen had spoken to before, what an ideal course progression looks like in order to build a really good pipeline for our students. There are some classes, if you look at it, and this is part of the work that we do in our organization, these classes lead to students not having higher levels of post-secondary readiness. And so you ask yourself, why are we having them go through this curriculum if it's leading essentially to a dead end? We want to remove prerequisites, coursework, and processes. And I understand that it's not as simply as easy as removing them. We also have to work on the mindsets that go along with this and have people understand our job is not to sort. Our job is specifically to get students to a certain level so that way they can access this in order to be successful. I'm going to pause right here just to give just a brief narrative. I went from high school, after a couple of years, I went into the military and I worked in trades. I was specifically an air conditioning and refrigeration mechanic. Oftentimes people are like, hey, you can go to college, you can go to the military. The military is not less than, it's just something different. And oftentimes, depending on that, what we refer to as college readiness score, depending on that score, when you test and take the ASVAB, it allows you access to different types of jobs. So there is no circle that our kids go into where what we call college readiness does not affect them. When you take this test, it rates you on a whole bunch of different skills: math, reading, writing, spatial, everything. And depending on those scores, then it tells you what kinds of jobs you're able to access once you're in the military. So all of that to say this, please understand that regardless of where our students are going, their ability to rise within any kind of job market is really dependent on the level and access to accelerated and advanced coursework that we give them while they're in school. So it's important not to say, hey, you're going to this so you don't need XYZ. They will always need it. It's just a matter if it allows them to rise within a certain industry or not. The third skill we talked about as far as removing barriers is analyzing student course taking patterns for informal barriers. Oftentimes what you will see, these barriers are programmatic, whether students are in special education, English language learners. Sometimes you see it specifically showing up based on students of color or students in poverty. And what we have seen is it's not because they don't know that it's available to them, but it's a matter of, based on their history, they sometimes need to let an invitation into those spaces. So really and truly, what are we doing as far as how do we invite students within those spaces? And also we want to make sure that as we're doing those, we're developing systems in order to not just address those informal barriers, but to put new systems in their place, and where we're also monitoring how well that these systems are working. Along with this, we really also talk about how do we build pipelines. Oftentimes we're going back to this idea of math, and I'm going to use this as an example as well, because what we have seen is that math is one of the most exclusive spaces, especially for advanced students within secondary world. And oftentimes we see where that pattern has started way back, even in elementary school, based on students who are in the gifted and talented track, all the way up. And so oftentimes, specifically in math, the ability then to recruit students is a little bit harder once you get to high school, because that pattern has already been established as they leave elementary school and going into middle school. So as we talk about this, I'm going to give some more information as far as some things we can do specifically within math in order to help this process. But we want to, at all levels, to proactively recruit, especially within the fourth year of mathematics. Math, more than any other subject, has the highest correlation to whether or not kids graduated from high school, go to college, stay in college, graduate from college, and specifically whether or not they go into a degree based on STEM. We want to also make sure we're marketing and promoting rigorous CTE programs. CTE and advanced coursework should not be in conflict with each other. All of these work together in order to help our students and to give them the skills so that they're future ready for any post-secondary work. Because we want to also make sure that students are not necessarily jumping from one CTE program to another. If a district has the ability, you want them to do that dabbling in middle school, but you want, once we reach high school, for them to follow a specific path and be in that path for 2 or 3 years, for them to stay in that pathway. What are the data showing, what studies are showing that when students follow that pattern, they're able to go into post-secondary life with higher degrees of success. And then we keep talking about that light senior year. Usually that is the time when students figure out, hey, I don't have to take this course, I don't have to take this course, I will only, and we want to dissuade them of that notion. There needs to be a mind shift at both the teacher level, student level, parent level, counselor level, as far as there should not be a light year. Persistence within core courses, math, science, social studies, English, and world languages, is very important for students having high degrees of post-secondary success. So you don't want for students to only have 3 years of something. As much as possible, you want them to engage with at least 4 years or more. And oftentimes within world languages, 2 or more usually has the same effect. But you want them, especially within math, to be able to move on for at least 4 years of a subject. Also, when we talking about, I'm so sorry, I'm on the one with the kind of seesaws. I'm sorry, I think we're a little bit off. There we go, thank you. Also, we want to, and this is something that most people know, where there is huge disproportionality as far as for our students of colors versus our students who are not of color, and also students in poverty, as far as whether or not they are accessing advanced coursework. So it's very important that we interrogate our own systems in order to see what that disparity is looking like. And so oftentimes what you're looking for is, depending on what percentage you have of each demographic, you want your numbers represented in advanced coursework to be as close as that percentage as possible. But what we're seeing in systems is often that those numbers are out of kilter, representing the fact that there are issues in regards to access. And sometimes that issue may simply be engagement, parent engagement. And letting them know, hey, why there's certain things that as leaders, we can be doing a little bit differerently. We want to recruit students with teacher recommendation, test scores, and other indicators. And I'm going to highlight, bold, italicize other indicators. It does not necessarily have to be quantitative. Oftentimes we figure if someone does not meet a cut score, they don't have the ability to move on to some more rigorous coursework. It is very doable to say, for example, if a student simply wants to access this because it is part of their life plan, what interventions, again, can I put in place to help them? So we want to make sure that the structures we're putting in place with our counselors and how we advise, it's always from the thought process of, what are your hopes and dreams? What do you want to accomplish? Now let us help you build a resume, an academic record that allows you to be able to access that. We want to work with our staff on changing and adapting their beliefs, but also understand that you don't need to change a mindset before you put these structures in place. This work should be happening simultaneously. And you also want to also use influential staff and students to assist in recruitment. So for example, if we know that students of color do not typically go into an advanced coursework, we've seen in the literature where they've stated, hey, recruit friend groups, do counseling sessions with these groups together, anything that you can do to create this, this atmosphere of safety so that people feel that they will not be alone in this endeavor. Oftentimes what we're seeing is that students are feeling that they will be lonely if they go into this space and there will be no one else with them. So a great tactic that we've seen is that counselors working with friend groups and or sometimes same demographic like students as it relates to race and ethnicity, so that there's not this feeling of being alone. We've talked about test scores, but again, we don't want that to be the only thing that we use, but they are a starting point. One of the ways you can audit your system is simply to say, hey, here's how many people meet a certain cut score. Let's go through, run the data by demographic and program and gender, and figure out how well are we doing as a system in regards to pulling in people as far as just making sure that everyone who just from that data should be in that space is within that space. Oftentimes what we see is there's disproportionality there. Oftentimes where you're having students who are not of color and not in poverty, where they're accessing it at a greater rate, even if they have the same score as other students. So you want to make sure that first your system is on an equal playing field and those numbers are representative of the kids who are already showing. And then you're going to go ahead and go in and recruit some more students based on other different things that you can pull in, want, need, where they want to go with their future, and so forth. So in summary, again, we want to look at patterns tied to course progression. We want to make sure that we address issues with curriculum alignment. We want to make sure that we're breaking the pattern, make sure that they're on ramps for students to go to from on level to advanced courses. Make sure that we're using a process to identify students. We can start first by using test data. And once we've pulled that and made sure that we've pulled everyone and no one has been left behind based on demographics, then we go in deeper within the system and use additional recruitment methods to make sure that we're leveling the playing field for our kids. So that is all I have on that subject. Now we're going to go and do our wrap up. If there are any questions, I wasn't monitoring the chat or the Q&A. Questions, comments, anything anyone would like more specific details in or around?
There's one I just saw in chat I can address while you scan the questions too, Natalie. One question was, do flexible graduation requirements that OSPI shared help or hurt students in their post-secondary plans? That's really in alignment with the coupling with strong advisement. So flexible graduation pathways are not bad per se and offering choices and options. The challenge is how do you make sure that you communicate to students and families so everybody has access to the same information? How are they choosing that pathway? Why would you not choose this fourth year of math? Or why would you not choose to take an additional year of science? Why would you choose this particular program? So anytime we have more flexible graduation requirements, it's back to our earlier point, we think it needs to be coupled with much more guidance and advisement from our entire community to make sure that when families and students are making those choices, do they have the information on why they're making those choices and navigating through those pathways. It's not equitable when some families are bringing information to bear, maybe because they had a parent who's attended post-secondary, they might have had a parent who's gone to college, and they know why they would choose this particular course versus this particular course. And other families don't have access to that same information. So more choices, more options, not bad. That's not good necessarily. It's how do you advise students and provide the information to students and families to navigate those choices and options? And how do we provide the ratios that can't be done? Again, I'll weigh in there. It can't be done with 400 students coming to the theater to register in half an hour with a counselor up front. There's just no way to give them that information in those kind of ratios. So making sure that all kids and students have that information. Any other questions you saw, Natalie?
Didn't see any other questions, but I'm sure this is a huge topic, and I know we delivered a lot of information in a short period of time. But to give you a real life how this information has played out, I had worked with Stephen previously, and then one of the things that we did in going through an analysis of my system, one of the things that we saw is, hey, which demographic within our system was disproportionately not accessing advanced coursework. And specifically, we also realized the fact that the 8th to 9th grade transition was our core opportunity to change the trajectory, that once kids were on a certain path, it was incredibly hard to change them that what coursework. So if they were in 11th grade going to 12th, once they've gone already in a certain path, we couldn't change it. So what we did with an 8th to 9th grade, based on the analysis of our system and seeing what courses the students were taking, what courses shouldn't be in our pipeline, we worked specifically and we had our counselors and we said, we will go ahead and we don't have the bandwidth to work with all students. So we pulled the students that were most in need. Based on our demographic, we looked at students who were African American or Hispanic, and also if they were in poverty. We pulled those numbers first, and we met specifically with them to do a deep dive into the counseling session so they understood, number one, so we understood what they wanted, and not just the student, but the parent. What is it that you want for your student? What is the hope and dream? What do you want for them post-secondary? And then we sat down and said, based on this, here are the courses and pathways that correlate best in order for your student being able to have that degree of success. And so we created 4-year plans where we can always, the students have the ability to change the plan from year to year, but where they were able to fully understand the connection between that academic resume they were creating and what they would be able to access after school. And so as Stephen had said previously, if people are first generation, if they have not had a lot of, experience as far as with college or understanding how what I take in high school allows me to access certain opportunities in post-secondary, whether it's a degree program, the military, anywhere, we found that we had to go ahead and bridge that gap in educating our community. And what I will tell you is we went from math and students being college ready in math was what was holding us back. Just with that process, we were able to move our kids from where the year previously we had about maybe 20% of our kids were in advanced math in 9th grade to over 50% in just 1 year with a conversation. And so depending on where you are in your history, your trajectory, please do not understand the opportunity to figure out who in your community is most in need and who needs to have that conversation. Sometimes it's just a matter of they don't understand the importance of it and why they need to do something different. But what we found is once we accessed the parent and explained it to the parent, then everything changed. Everything changed as far as how they pushed their kids to do and how they then supported us and how we worked together in order to put the kid on a different trajectory. That's not to say that they had to go to college, but what we said to them, then if college or anything is a choice, at least your choice is not made by the fact that you didn't have a certain level of education. You can make any choice you want at any time you want, but we've prepared you in order to be able to have choices in life, rather having those choices being made for you.
Love that story. One question that just came in on small schools. One piece of advice we would give to the small schools is don't try to be a large comprehensive high school and use your smallness to your advantage. So what Natalie was just talking about on guidance and advisement and inviting students, you can use your pared down offerings. And I went to a small school in Washington State, and I know that you guys have some tremendous wraparound support services, but you can have all of your kids, for example, there's small schools in Washington State that have the default pathway is you end up in a senior year AP course for English or a college in the high school course. That is just what all students do, and they support all students in that. So you don't even need to get to the point where you're inviting kids into the space. Oftentimes small schools try to be a large comprehensive school and offer choices and options or feel like you need to have a really, really large course catalog. Use your smallness to your advantage and the incredible support you have around kids, but offer opportunities for students where it's just the default. That's just what we do in the school, and all students go to that, and then support your kids in those pathways. There's some great things that small schools can do with your size and to use it to your advantage. A couple of things in terms of opportunities and next steps. One opportunity is if your district is interested in some advanced analysis, our company is partnering with AWSP, and we are going to be working with about 10 districts next year at an incredible price of the state of Washington is underwriting some of the work to support your district in analyzing your data, looking at your course taking patterns, assisting you in breaking down your data and developing action plans. So there's the opportunity for up to about 10 districts. We're actively recruiting districts right now. So if that's of interest, you can email me. I'll get it to the right folks in our team, and we're recruiting districts right now. OSPI has also been great on offering an I-grant to support districts to support your academic acceleration. That I-grant has been offered the past couple years, and they are offering that grant again. So watch for that I-grant, which will be offered soon in June. Will be coming. So that's a couple different options. You can email us or watch for that I-grant around academic acceleration. There's some great partners across the state to support you in this work. We encourage everybody to explore your data, really identify what's causing that particular pattern in your data, and to develop a multiple year plan of action and track your progress and on some metrics. So Natalie had a great example where they had a team goal. They said, this is our percent of students enrolling in 9th grade accelerated math. And they set a goal and they chose it, and they put a plan into action in order to alter that. And they were tracking that, celebrating success. They put those parent academies in place and all of the information sessions, and got huge gains. So choose a goal. This is where we're at. This is the percent we're trying to get into an AP course, or the percent we're trying to get into a college in the high school course. Track your progress, celebrate, take your wins, and continue to monitor and adjust from your point from that point on. Anything else from questions? I think hand it over to Kefi unless there's any other questions that you have that we've missed.
I'm not seeing any other questions right now, but I do want to encourage folks to reach out to the team over at Always Be Learning. They're really knowledgeable, and what a great presentation. I feel like every time I listen to y'all, I learn something new, and there's so much nuance to master scheduling, and just I've always heard that if you want to see what a school values, look at their master schedule. So it's great to see some work happening and interest out there in thinking about that. We do have an evaluation that I'm going to launch. It's just some quick questions, but I also put in the chat, we have a longer feedback survey if you're willing to tell us things in more narrative form and not just, the click list. We would love to get feedback on presenters and your thoughts about how we can improve our webinar offerings in this next year. So that's there for you. And for folks who want to get clock hours, we definitely want to see you get clock hours for participating today. So if you're watching live, or even if you're watching the recording later, you can still earn clock hours from watching the recording. All you have to do is register in PD Enroller for this event and fill out their evaluation. It'll come to you in your email. And if you're watching the recording, also just take our feedback survey and we'll use that to verify your attendance. And if you have questions about this, Ronnie Larson is our contact. She handles all of our clock hours and she'll help you with it. And thanks again to Able for being on with us today and just sharing their knowledge. I love this topic, and I'm excited for the work that you're doing with AWSP and OSPI, and just the continued growth in our districts across the state. So thanks again.